This session is the second one that is totally interfaces based, but it's the local team this time. And actually you got a dose of it because the work of Mocha and Sarah is obviously an offshoot of what's being presented. So EARS 2 was mentioned by them earlier on, and I'm going to come back to that. Compose with Sounds is the subject of a workshop this afternoon, which is a software program, which I'm going to introduce you to briefly. The key is in the subtitle, bringing sound-based creativity to anyone, even with no prior experience.
Well, what's the timing?
You got appointed a week ago, don't worry. And I got the clock ticket, so don't ask questions now, you can do that later. So here's the structure of the talk. I'm going to talk about the history of how I got into this, not very long. A history of the projects that we're discussing. We will discuss each individually, even though they're connected, as you'll find out. A couple of words about the future. The final word and acknowledgements are there. They're going to go by so fast that you won't be able to read them, but if you ask me, I will send them to you. Before I start, something came up, which I think is right. You ended up with those CDs, but you should have gotten the new one, and we decided to get an address list from everybody. So before you go to the reception and please write out your address, or alternatively send it to me at one point. And once those things arrive, with the accents that we couldn't deal with, we'll send them out to you, because I think that would be quite right. Here we go. As I mentioned briefly yesterday, I was frustrated already as a student that new music was reaching us, the makers. And subsequently, starting in 1991, or actually in the late 80s, I started giving talks about it. In 1991, I wrote a book, and the title says it's all, What's the Matter with Today's Experimental Music? I won't get into that, but that's a long time ago. That's basically the point I want to make. So this issue of bringing new music to new audiences has been part of my being for a long time, and it's manifested itself in a number of publications. This one coming out only 6 years ago was made for teachers or anyone with no experience in this stuff at all, which highly fed in to the two projects I'm going to present today. Lots of talks, and by the way, also my music. I don't want to make an elitist music and say, oh, by the way, music should be for everyone, and then nobody likes it, or nobody understands it, or nobody cares, but you have to finish the sentence. Something's it. So you have to look at this holistically. Of course, I'm an educator. My salary is not coming from those compositions. It's coming from universities. And for the music curricula that I've been responsible for, have all taken this into account. And therefore, what the MTI-2 does is it makes sonic art, it studies sonic art, and it has a huge outreach program with sonic art. And within that, the two things I'm going to discuss right now are central. And they are the EARS 2 pedagogical program and the Compose with Sounds program. There were a couple of other things I'd done before I got into this that are worthy of a brief mention. In the early 90s, I did a project where I listened to almost 200 electroacoustic works to find out what is it that people who have never listened to this music might hold on to, so that they can connect with it. And I gave it a name, the something to hold on to factor in timbral music. I made a list of a number of items. Panos knows that a lot of young people studying these days read this and add to it with their own ideas. From 2000 onwards, the Intention Reception Project, first undertaken by a PhD student of mine, introduced carefully selected works of electroacoustic music, carefully selected in that they weren't going to be too alienating, and they weren't going to be, somebody said something about abstract, and that was right, but there were going to be connections, either mainly through the material used in the works, so people didn't get completely lost right away. And in this project, we played this music to people who had never heard it before, people that might be wanting to study some kind of music, and specialists. It was the first group that we were truly interested in. And for those that have never heard of this project, just to cut to the quick, the worst result we've ever got with the music we've introduced to people who've never heard it before, regardless of age, was 3 out of 5 wanted to hear something like it again. We thought 1 in 4 would be good enough, but I'll repeat it. 3 out of 5, 59% was the worst result we've ever gotten. 80% is the best result we've ever gotten. Why is it not taught in schools? Why is it not on the radio? Why are the publishing media not addressing it if that many people might be interested in it? So those things led to what's taken place subsequently. And so it obviously connects with my frustration of the marginalization of contemporary music. Preceding years 2, the electric-acoustic resource site also happened in the last decade, and that's what the original looked like. It's being rebuilt currently in France on a new platform that's going to allow us to do much more with it, like automatically generate stuff. So anybody who's used this in our field will know that there's over 500 terms in various languages and various definitions of those terms. There's almost 3,000 items in the bibliography, but by now that could be 5 or 6. And we're going to use data mining to raise that. And for the second time today, it was adopted by and supported by UNESCO, which is a high point in my career when they invited me to come to that. And it was they who said, can you do something like this for kids? And I went, oh, that's easy for you to ask. A resource site with only words on it is not what a kid wants. Kids want to do stuff. And I said, okay, I'm going to give it a try. So that whole conversation took 1 minute, and that took over 10 years. And Mocha did her whole PhD on it. Years 2 has the old symbol and the new symbol, which is as close to Dr. Dre as we could get, and is an e-learning site. Years 2 was developed with grants, originally with grants from the UK, and then we subsequently, once it was completed as an e-learning site, got smaller grants for translation and adaptation. So composers talking about their work don't all come from the UK or the US or Canada or Australia. They come from France, or they come from Germany, or they come from Belgium, or they come from Greece, etc., etc. We're taking care of the French. Interfaces project's taking care, I hope, of the German and the Greek. The Italian's been started. The Spanish is almost complete. This is halfway done, and it stays in the room. He's in charge of the Japanese translation, and thank you so much. It's unbelievable to do something and know that it is going to appear in so many languages for potentially so many people. Its vision is to learn holistically, not this was the history, this was the first person to do it, memorize the name, why don't you just listen to the first piece, and then that happened, and then that happened. No. Learn technological, theoretical, historical concepts. Listen to works that are related to whatever we're talking to, and make something on the basis of what we're talking about at the same time. So we have what we call projects. You can do them in a couple of hours, you can do them in a couple of weeks, depending to what extent and detail you want to go. And we have beginner, advanced, and beginner, intermediate, advanced levels. It's concept-driven, which means I'm not talking about soundscape, electronic music, this, that, and the other. I'm talking about using real-world sounds, eventually manipulating them, eventually generating new sounds. Everybody can understand that. At the moment, there is an introduction, 9 other projects, and actually an extra one about noise. Moch has already told you about the teacher's packs, which are sublime. We'll have to see whether they get translated or not. And the create is this software, Compose with Sound. So this is the home page. You can see how to get to the projects. Those are the 3 basic parts. And if there's a word you're stuck on, you go into the encyclopedia, find out more. And sometimes it'll give you a reference if you want to know more. So if you're not in a classroom, you just can go to any page, because if you go to create, all the pages drop down, and there are a lot of them, and so on. But if you're in a classroom and you don't know what to do, you follow the project, and you use a teacher's pack. That's how that works. This, is the list of projects. So as I said, introduction, real world manipulate, generate, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and the noise one with glitch. I'm not going to play this, but this is a sound example of something that is like a pool game, an electroacoustic piece by the American composer Lavisa Montanaro. And as it plays, you get evocative questions asked to you. And you start thinking about various aspects of the piece. And then it gives you some hints about what's going on in the piece, so you can actually see how the piece is evolving, and that's actually music and not just the sound of pool balls, and so on. So this is a wonderful way to just start engaging with this stuff. You can see that it's very colorful, and there's a lot of graphic things, there's a lot of audio and audiovisual examples. So for young people, Mo just said it was for 11 to 14 years old. I have to finish that sentence. It was created for 11 to 14 years old, but it's used by 7 to 99-year-olds. Because it doesn't really matter how old you are if you're new to it. And at the end of each of the projects, there's 5 multiple choice questions, the success of which can be transmitted to a teacher. End of demo, because I only have 20 minutes, and I, as the convener, do not have the right to go over time. So, let's get back. Compose with Sounds is a creative software that's had initial support from a smaller European Union created a culture grant that we led, and is now part of the Interfaces project. I'm so happy to say. And yours too is also being further developed as part of this as well. Our vision was to make it as intuitive as possible and to ensure that people who have no musical background or no musical literacy can go as far as anybody else. And it's true with UP-Sketch as well. It fulfills most demands of the national curricula for music. That one you wouldn't expect. But if you look at the elements of structure and pitch and this and that, rhythm, etc., all of that can happen in this. All of it, no exception. Except if it says you need to play a Western instrument or a something instrument. That you're not going to get out of. The basis of this is sampling. There are many reasons why, but I'll just give you the simplest. If you want to make links with experience, then you use recordings of things that people are familiar with, and they can discover the musicality of that material. And by the way, if you're 11 to 14, the one that you're going to want the most is your own voice. We use the sounds, we call them sound cards. It has a sound on it, and it has an image to make you remember what it is. So GRM was part of the first project, and they're about écoute réduite, reduced listening. So you can also turn it into a waveform, so you don't see the source, because they don't want that. But kids do. So we start with the image that belongs to it. Recording and importing sounds, you can do that with a phone, you can do it with any device that works. There are manipulation techniques from extremely simple to extremely sophisticated, so we've got levels from beginning to advanced as well. There are synthesis options, but that's not intuitive for kids. UPIC was one of the most intuitive forms of sampling, synthesis that was ever created. But we have included it because pedagogically that's right. Anybody can add sounds, anybody can export sounds, you can share sounds. There are legality issues, because a lot of sounds have copyright on them. So that can be a problem. People can compose individually or in groups. Kids love to compose in groups. Sampling culture is collective, so there's nothing the matter with that. Composers don't have to be individuals, so John, I'm going to preempt you. The remark about composers yesterday and the discussion that followed, I'm with you. That's an artisan skill. We're talking about music making, and it could be individual or group, doesn't matter. You can export mixes and pieces, so they're sharing. And to get schools to accept this, I have to underline the fact that it's available for cross-curricular purposes. If we're talking soundscapes, we're talking nature, we're talking geography, if we're talking other aspects, we're talking about acoustics, science, and so on and so forth. There's going to be a Windows version coming out very soon. There's going to be a tablet version coming out within the year as part of our project. There's an audio-visual layer to the sequencer, which you're going to see in a second, coming out. And there's a live version, so kids can use their own controllers, up to 5 players, to perform the stuff that they've prepared. That's what the sequencer looks like. The sound cards are at the top. The layers, unlike other software, are just the sound. It's not that channel of sound. And if you want to get to sophisticated stuff, you can have breakpoints across the sound, and it's almost as good as Pro Tools. Here are a couple of examples, extremely briefly. If you're using panning and you want your sound to go to the left or the right, it goes to the left or the right. With reverberation, you can make the room larger, the type of wall changes. So you can see the space you're in. If you use a filter, your sound gets bent. That's a bandpass filter. Oops, the other one was additive synthesis, just so you see it. I'm going to play a minute of 2 pieces that came out of the first project. Some of you know who is Ludger Brümer. He has got my position in CwS, so he's got a more important power job than I do. He sat next to me at the premiere at a GRM concert in Paris. And we had some professional pieces on, but it was mainly kids' pieces. And this one came up by Florian Sulpice, who at the time was 13, lived in Bourges, which is famous for a festival, but he had nothing to do with it. And this is the first piece of music with sounds he made in his life called Série. Professional piece until he read the program. Now, the next young lady named Jasmine Mondilu is from Lisbon. Oh, it's going. I'll speak while it's on. Oh no, that's the series, sorry. Get back. Jasmine, 9 years old, daddy's a composer, granddaddy's a composer, and granddaddy took the same sound material and made another piece with it, which was the goal of the thing. But you can tell this is from a kid. You know it's from a kid. But it's mighty clever, I have to say.
Para mim livro é uma conversa secreta no papel. Para mim uma conversa secreta no papel. Para mim livro é uma viagem muito países com ambientes um objeto muito
Stop that! Doesn't matter! It's great! The whole piece takes a minute and a half, which is probably the maximum of our capabilities. All those sections stopped at the right time. Thank you, Daddy and Granddad. But oh my goodness, 9! I love this piece. How many pieces do I want to hear often? Well, that's one of them. And I'm just really proud that came out of the project. So, where the project is going in the future, well, as part of the Interfaces project, we made all sorts of new workshops. Even though Years 2 is sort of like workshops, sometimes people have to go out in the field and introduce stuff. Dave and Duncan are going to be talking about workshops that are related to this, and John Richards is going to be talking to workshops related to DIY electronics, hacking, making, and stuff, reflecting very much what we do here. All of these are online already. Anybody can use it. And we're going to have people going to the Organised Center to train people to take these out to schools in Greece as well. I've got some ideas of what we could do with Years 2 and what we could do with composable sounds in the future, but I want them all done first. So back to Avi's nose. A couple of months ago, just before our meeting, I've been invited by the music officer, I don't know what her formal title is, of the Ministry of Culture and Education. Superintendent of Music of the Ministry of Culture and Education in Cyprus. Brought together loads of school teachers from across the country, and I introduced this to them with Nasia Therapontos, whose name is mentioned, and others who are working for them. And it is now recommended on the national curriculum for everybody in the country. Electroacoustic music for kids, everybody in the country. The fact that that's happened, I can now go to the French Ministry of Education, I can go to the States in Germany, and forget about Britain. I mean, they just took composition off the damn thing. But we'll get endorsements. It's so fulfilling. So talk about impact. You know, the amount of compositions I didn't make because I did this diminishes in my mind with the joy of the fact that actually people will be making it, and I don't have to write that book, What's the Matter with Today's Electroacoustic Music, because it's going to be offered to kids everywhere. So here they fly by. That's the team. Moch is in there, and all these, Dave and Duncan are in there. And there are some key references. Just ask me, I'll send them to you. And my time's up. But it's those two examples at the end that really do it. Because that's the proof of the pudding. It's just hearing what the people have never done it, never heard it, make of it. It's totally wonderful. Any questions?
Out of curiosity, a practical question. I mean, you mentioned sampling. So is there a repository of sound, like a sound bank from which the kids
There are some sound banks in the beginning. They're encouraged to discover things like free sound, where they can grab sounds, but they're encouraged even more
to record,
to do some listening, which those guys are going to talk about, and through the kind of a sound walk idea or whatever is relevant in a class situation or a community situation, pull this out and record sounds, get them in shape, find an image that goes with them. By the way, if we have sounds that belong together, so you have a group of sounds that you want to see as a group of sounds, we call them sound card packs, like a pack of cards. And they can be put together and they can be uploaded and downloaded and other people can use it. It's about sharing.
So practically this sound library lives in a server somewhere, or?
Well, when you get the software, you get a couple of sound packs.
Okay.
Yeah. And once this is done and is as robust as I want, I'm going to move the original Compose with Sound site onto the EARS2 site, and I'm going to put a huge repository of sounds on it. Absolutely possible. You shouldn't ask me questions because you're going to get the workshop later. But you can still. I'm sure I got a minute left. Yeah.
It's kind of almost just a rhetorical question, really, I think, in some ways. That your opening statement about the sort of almost like a straw poll of engagement, where you were expecting sort of a 1 in 4 interest in people that would listen to that music get.
Naively, when we started the project, and I thought we're dealing with electroacoustic music and they're not getting much choice of anything in schools, my guess, based on nothing, was that a 5th to a 4th might want to hear something like this.
I was just wondering why, and this is the rhetorical aspect of it, is why is this expectation of engagement so low?
Because no one's ever heard of it in society, and when they do hear it through stealth in a movie, an advert at the beginning of club culture stuff, they're not knowing what they're getting. So they don't identify it as a thing. And what they don't know, that one expects they're not going to want. Because as one gets older, your openness, what's the term, open-eared?
Open-earedness hypothesis.
Yeah, we're more closed to new stuff. And in fact, when we did the intensive reception project, the elderly were the hardest group to crack. So that was where it came from. But of course, you're right in asking the question. It was naive, and they can enjoy it. And that was proven. Because we're talking about hundreds of people that have done this. And by the way, intention reception is now been executed in Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Canada, Argentina, and Brazil, with similar results. And Malaysia was Borneo. We're talking middle of nowhere, man. And they did soundscapes, and that was the buying. Motion.
I think it also has to do with the cognitive prototype of what is music. And you learn what is music by just growing up and listening to music and repeating brain, you know what's music. And then we are kind of widening that. We're widening that so much with this, but using the same concepts and bringing that together is really difficult for some people to kind of understand that this is still music.
Somebody else had a hand up. Yes.
Okay, I can't wait for it to be online and to start to use it. But could you tell me something about the group composition process?
Okay.
Or will you explain maybe later in the workshop?
No. Well, they probably come back to it. It was not my personal goal when I set this up. I was going to have a professional composer work with 2 or 3 students chosen after workshops in the classroom. But some of the animators, and in particular one in France and one in Norway, just said, "Oh, you guys want to make something together? That's fine."
Mm-hmm.
And when I got the report on that, I started saying to others, "Why don't you try this out?"
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you will have some incompatibility issues in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But the group composition, where people were showing weakness, they were strengthened by somebody who got it, and was somebody more creative, but the other one wanted to use this sound,
Mm-hmm.
and it heightens what we call the ownership of the outcome.
Okay, but are they using then one computer or one?
Well, they can
each other?
prepare stuff on different ones, but when the class works together, they're essentially going to put all their stuff on the same machine. But they don't have to. No. Okay, I'll whet your appetite. Is Dave and Duncan up next? Because that would follow me up kind of more logically.